I woke up to the sound of construction equipment on what I knew for certain was my property, and immediately felt my blood pressure spike to dangerous levels. My name is Ryan Sawyer, and I had lived in the Pinewood Grove subdivision in Boulder, Colorado for exactly 3 years. The neighborhood itself was pleasant enough, tucked against the foothills with stunning mountain views, but the homeowners association had been a constant thorn in my side since day one. They had opinions about everything from the shade of beige you could paint your mailbox to the exact height your grass could reach before they sent you a violation notice. But this morning, as I stood at my bedroom window in my boxer shorts and old college t-shirt, staring out at the 2 acres of land that extended behind my house, I realized they had crossed a line I never imagined possible. There were actual bulldozers on my land. I threw on jeans and boots, not bothering with socks, and stormed outside. The November air bit at my face as I marched across my backyard toward the section of property that sloped gently down toward a creek bed. This land was specifically mentioned in my deed. I had paid extra for it. I had the survey markers and everything. A man in a hard hat was directing a small excavator as it pushed soil around, creating what appeared to be a sledding hill. Another crew was unloading lumber from a truck. "Hey," I shouted, waving my arms. "What the hell do you think you are doing?" The man in the hard hat turned, clipboard in hand. "Morning. You must be one of the neighbors. Great, right? The HOA commissioned us to build a sledding park for the community. Should be done in about 2 weeks. This is my land," I said, trying to keep my voice level and failing. "You are trespassing." He laughed, actually laughed, and consulted his clipboard. "No, sir. We have the permits right here. The HOA provided us with the plot information. This land was designated for community use." "Let me see that," I demanded, and he handed over the clipboard with a shrug. Sure enough, there was a crude map showing my property, or what someone had decided to pretend was not my property, marked as Community Recreation Zone 3B. It had been signed off by someone named Brenda Whitmore, HOA president. "This is fraudulent," I said, shoving the clipboard back at him. "I own this land. I have the deed. You need to stop work immediately." The contractor's smile faded. "Look, buddy, I just do what I am paid to do. Take it up with the HOA. We have a contract and permits." "Stop working," I said firmly. "Right now. Or I will call the police and report you for trespassing and property destruction." He studied my face for a moment, probably trying to figure out if I was serious. Whatever he saw there convinced him. He held up a hand to his crew and called for them to halt. "Fine," he said. "But I am calling the HOA right now. This is going to cost them money if we sit here idle." "You do that," I said, pulling out my own phone. I called the non-emergency police line first, explaining the situation. The dispatcher said she would send an officer out. Then I went back into my house, found my property deed and survey documents, and made copies of everything. My hands were shaking with anger as the printer churned out pages. By the time I got back outside, a woman had arrived in a white Mercedes SUV with a Pinewood Grove HOA decal on the side. I recognized her immediately. Brenda Whitmore was in her late 40s, with an asymmetrical blonde haircut that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and the kind of yoga-toned figure that spoke of expensive gym memberships and personal trainers. She wore designer athleisure wear and sunglasses that cost more than some used cars. "Ryan," she said, using my first name like we were old friends, which we absolutely were not. "What seems to be the problem? You are holding up important community work." "The problem," I said, holding up my deed, "is that you have authorized construction on private property." "My property. This is illegal, Brenda." She waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, that. There was a clerical error in the original development documents. This land was always meant to be part of the community recreation areas. We are simply correcting an oversight. An oversight, I repeated slowly. An oversight that somehow transferred 2 acres of land that I paid $80,000 for into HOA property. The HOA is willing to reimburse you a portion of that cost, she said, pulling out a folder from her massive designer purse. We had it appraised. The land is worth approximately $30,000. We will write you a check today. I stared at her in disbelief. You cannot just take someone's land, Brenda. That is not how property rights work in America. This is not a negotiation. That is my land. I own it legally, and you need to get these people off it right now. Her pleasant expression hardened. The HOA board voted on this unanimously. We reviewed the original subdivision plans, and there was clear language about community spaces. Your deed is simply incorrect. My deed is filed with Boulder County, I said. It has been surveyed and verified. You do not get to decide it is incorrect because you want to build a sledding hill. A police cruiser pulled up to the curb, and Officer Martinez stepped out. I had met him before at a neighborhood watch meeting. Nice guy, competent. He walked over with that careful neutrality cops develop when they do not know which person in an argument is going to be the problem. Morning, folks, he said. Someone want to explain what is going on? Brenda immediately shifted into a completely different persona, all warm smiles and concerned citizen. Officer, thank you so much for coming. We are having a simple misunderstanding about property lines. The HOA is building a sledding park for our community's children, and Mr. Sawyer seems to be confused about where his property ends. I am not confused, I said, handing Officer Martinez my documents. This is my deed and survey. That land is mine. The HOA is trying to seize it. Officer Martinez reviewed the papers carefully, then looked at the construction site, then at Brenda. You have documentation showing this is HOA property, madam? Of course, she said, producing her own papers with a flourish. He compared both sets of documents for several minutes while we all stood in uncomfortable silence. The construction crew had gathered near their vehicles, clearly annoyed at the delay. Finally, Officer Martinez spoke. From what I can see here, Mr. Sawyer's deed and survey clearly indicate he owns this land. Madam, your documents appear to be internal HOA planning papers, not legal property records. Brenda's face flushed. The HOA has legal authority over community spaces. This was designated as a community space in the original development plan. Then you will need to resolve that through the courts, Officer Martinez said. But right now, based on recorded property documents, this is Mr. Sawyer's land. The construction crew needs to leave. This is outrageous, Brenda said, her voice rising. Do you know how much we have already invested in this project? The community is expecting this park. Madam, I cannot help you with that, Officer Martinez said firmly. Clear the construction equipment off Mr. Sawyer's property, please. Brenda looked like she wanted to argue further, but something in Officer Martinez's expression stopped her. She turned to the contractor and said tersely, "Pack up. We will address this through proper legal channels." The contractor, who had been watching this whole thing with tired resignation, just nodded and started directing his crew to load equipment. "This is not over, Ryan," Brenda said to me, her voice dripping with barely contained fury. "The HOA has rights and we will be pursuing them." "Looking forward to it," I said, probably more confidently than I felt. After everyone left, Officer Martinez stayed for a few extra minutes. "You should probably get a real estate attorney," he said quietly. HOAs can be persistent, and if they think they have any legal ground to stand on, they will make this expensive. "Thanks for the advice," I said, and for backing me up with the actual legal documents. Just doing my job, he said. But seriously, lawyer up. This has the smell of something that is going to get messy. He was right, of course. Over the next 2 weeks, I received no fewer than 15 certified letters from the HOA's legal firm, each one more threatening than the last. They claimed everything from adverse possession, rights to some obscure clause in the subdivision covenants that supposedly gave them authority over all land suitable for community recreation. I hired an attorney named Patricia Chen, who came highly recommended and had experience dealing with HOA disputes. She was in her 30s, sharp as a razor, and after reviewing all my documents and the HOA's claims, she laughed. "This is absurd," she said, sitting in her office overlooking downtown Boulder. "They have absolutely no legal basis for any of this. Your property ownership is crystal clear. The subdivision covenants they keep citing do not say what they think they say. We could shut this down in about 5 minutes in front of a judge. So why do they keep pushing?" I asked. Patricia leaned back in her chair. "Because they are counting on you not wanting to spend the money on legal fees. They are trying to bully you into giving up the land. It is a tactic HOAs use all the time with individual homeowners." "That is not going to work," I said. "Good," she said, "because I do not like bullies. Let me send them a letter explaining exactly how wrong they are in legal terms that will make it clear we are prepared to go to court if necessary." Patricia's letter must have been effective because the threatening legal notices stopped. For about 3 weeks, everything was quiet. I started to think maybe the HOA had finally accepted reality and moved on. I should have known better. 2 days before Thanksgiving, I came home from work at the software company where I worked as a developer to find that the HOA had simply gone ahead and finished building the sledding park on my land anyway. I stood in my backyard, literally unable to believe what I was seeing. There was a completed sledding hill, complete with compacted snow safety fencing, a small warming hut, and even a sign that read Pinewood Grove Community Sledding Park sponsored by your HOA. They had done this during the day while I was at work. They had simply trespassed and built it anyway. I immediately called Patricia, who was just as shocked as I was. "This is criminal trespass, property damage, and probably a dozen other things," she said. "Document everything. Take pictures and videos. Call the police again." I spent the next hour photographing every inch of the construction from multiple angles, taking video and documenting everything. Then I called the police. Officer Martinez was not available, but Officer Thompson came out instead. She was less familiar with the situation, so I had to explain everything from the beginning, showing her my previous police report, my property documents, and the new construction. "So they just built this while you were at work?" she asked, incredulous. "Yes," I said. "Without permission, on land they have been told repeatedly that they do not own." Officer Thompson walked around the site, examining everything. "The problem is that it is built now. We can file a report for trespassing and property damage, but getting it removed is going to be a civil matter that you will have to pursue through the courts. So they can just steal my land and build on it, and there are no immediate consequences." I asked, trying not to sound as frustrated as I felt. "I did not say that," Officer Thompson replied. "I will file the report, and I will go have a conversation with the HOA president, but forcing them to tear this down is going to require a court order. You should talk to your attorney about an emergency injunction." Patricia filed for an emergency injunction the next morning, but because of the Thanksgiving holiday, we could not get in front of a judge until the following Monday. In the meantime, the HOA sent out a cheerful community email announcing the opening of the sledding park for the first day of December. I spent Thanksgiving alone in my house, watching through my windows as Brenda and several other HOA board members inspected their illegal sledding park on my property, taking photos and pointing at things like they owned the place. Something snapped in me that day. If they were going to steal my land, I decided, then I was going to make it as expensive and inconvenient for them as possible. I spent the Friday after Thanksgiving shopping. I went to Home Depot and bought materials for a 6-foot privacy fence and 2 gates with heavy-duty locks. I also bought several private property no trespassing signs and property under video surveillance signs. Then, I went to Best Buy and purchased a comprehensive security camera system with cloud backup. I spent the entire weekend building the fence around the sledding park. My property was already marked with survey stakes from when I had it surveyed after the first incident, so I knew exactly where to build. The fence completely enclosed the sledding park with 1 vehicle gate and 1 pedestrian gate, both equipped with heavy-duty padlocks. I also installed 6 security cameras covering every angle of approach, all recording to a cloud service that would preserve evidence even if someone tried to destroy the cameras. On Sunday evening, I made a large sign and mounted it on the pedestrian gate. It read, "Private property. Sledding park access. Adults $15, children $10. Hours. Weekends 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Proceeds to offset costs of illegal construction. Cash only. Management reserves all rights." Then I sat back and waited to see what would happen. Monday morning, my doorbell started ringing at approximately 6:30 in the morning. I ignored it. It rang again and again. Finally, I looked at my phone app showing the security camera feed at my front door. Brenda stood there in a puffy winter coat, her face already red either from cold or anger or both. Behind her were 3 other people I recognized from HOA meetings. I took my time getting coffee before I answered the door. "Ryan," Brenda said the moment I opened it, her voice tight and controlled. "You need to take down that fence immediately." "Good morning, Brenda," I said pleasantly. "No, I do not think I will. That is my property and I will fence it if I choose to." "That fence is blocking access to community property," she said. "No, it is blocking access to my private property that you built on illegally," I corrected her. "Speaking of which, you should be aware that Officer Thompson filed criminal trespass and property damage reports against the HOA. My attorney has also filed for an injunction, and we will be requesting the park be completely removed at HOA expense." One of the men behind her, whose name I thought was Richard or Robert, spoke up. "You cannot just put up a fence around community facilities." "I did not put a fence around community facilities," I said. "I put a fence around my land that you trespassed on. The fact that you built something there without permission is your problem, not mine." "The community is expecting to use that park this winter," Brenda said. "We have already announced it. Do you know how this makes the board look?" "Again, not my problem," I said. "You could have avoided all of this by not building on my property." "Take down the fence, Ryan," she said, and there was something dangerous in her voice now. "This is your last warning." "Or what?" I asked. "You will build something else on my property. You are already being sued. You already have criminal complaints against the HOA. What exactly do you think you can threaten me with at this point?" We had a staring contest for a moment. Then Brenda turned and stalked back to her Mercedes without another word, her entourage following. That afternoon, we had our hearing for the emergency injunction. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s named Judge Carmichael, reviewed all the evidence Patricia presented and the HOA's attorney's responses, looked up at both of us, and said, "Let me make sure I understand this correctly. The defendant HOA built a recreational facility on the plaintiff's private property without permission, despite being told by law enforcement that they did not own said property. The HOA's attorney, a nervous-looking young man named Eric Hoffman, cleared his throat. Your Honor, the HOA maintains that there was ambiguity in the original subdivision documents regarding community spaces. Where is this ambiguity? Judge Carmichael asked, flipping through papers. I have the plaintiff's deed right here. It is quite clear. I have the county survey. Also clear. What am I missing? The original developer's intent was for certain lands to be available for community use, Hoffman tried. But those lands were sold to Mr. Sawyer, Judge Carmichael said. With a deed. That was recorded. What part of this is ambiguous? Hoffman had no good answer to that. Judge Carmichael granted the emergency injunction. The HOA was ordered to immediately cease representing the sledding park as a community facility, was prohibited from entering my property, and was given 30 days to completely remove all structures and restore the land to its original condition. She also ordered the HOA to pay my legal fees for this hearing. I felt vindicated as we left the courthouse. Patricia was grinning. That was about as decisive as it gets, she said. They are done. How long until they actually have to remove everything? I asked. They have 30 days, but honestly, I would expect them to start immediately. Judge Carmichael made it very clear she was not happy with them. But the HOA did not start removing anything. Instead, they apparently decided to pretend the hearing had not happened. The next Saturday, the first weekend in December, I woke up to find approximately 30 people with sleds gathered at the locked gate to my fenced property, looking confused. Several were already on their phones. I watched through my security cameras as Brenda pulled up in her Mercedes. I could not hear what she was saying to the crowd, but I could see her pointing at my house and gesturing emphatically. The crowd's confusion seemed to turn toward anger, at least for some of them. I went outside, still in my bathrobe and holding my coffee mug, and walked over to the gate. "Morning, folks," I said cheerfully. "Welcome to my private property. As the sign says, admission is $15 for adults and $10 for children. Cash only. This is supposed to be free community property," a man in a ski jacket said angrily. "The HOA said so." "The HOA does not own this property," I said. "I do. There is a court injunction ordering them to remove the park, but while it is still here, and since I did not ask for it and do not want it, I figured I might as well recoup some of my costs." "This is outrageous," Brenda said, pushing to the front of the crowd. "You are holding community resources hostage." "I am charging admission to my private property," I said calmly, "which is perfectly legal, unlike building a park on someone else's land without permission." "Nobody is paying you a dime," Brenda declared. "Everyone, ignore him. This is a community park." "Then you are all trespassing," I said, still calm. "And I have called the police to report a large group attempting to unlawfully enter my property. I imagine they will be here soon." That caused some murmuring in the crowd. A woman with 2 small children looked uncomfortable and started backing away toward her car. "This is ridiculous," the man in the ski jacket said. "What kind of person charges kids to go sledding?" "The kind of person whose property was stolen by his HOA," I replied. "Look, I did not want this situation. I did not ask for a sledding park. The HOA built it illegally, and a judge has ordered them to remove it. But until they do, this is my land, and I will manage it as I see fit." "We could just hop the fence," someone in the back said. "You could," I agreed. "And then you would be criminally trespassing, and I have 6 security cameras recording everything, and the police are already on their way. But sure, you could try that." More people started drifting back to their cars. A few looked genuinely angry, but most just seemed disappointed and confused. One older woman stopped and asked, "Is this really private property?" "Yes, madam," I said. "I have owned it for 3 years. The HOA built this without my permission." She nodded slowly. "Then I suppose you have every right to fence it. Sorry for the trouble." "No trouble from you," I assured her. "Your issue is with the HOA, not me." By the time Officer Martinez arrived, about 15 minutes later, the crowd had mostly dispersed. Only Brenda remained, standing by her car with her arms crossed, radiating fury. Officer Martinez looked at me, at Brenda, at the fenced sledding park, and sighed. "So the HOA decided to ignore the court order?" he asked. "They have not started removing anything," I confirmed. "And they apparently told people the park was open, despite the injunction." Officer Martinez walked over to Brenda. "Madam, are you aware there is a court order requiring the HOA to remove this structure and prohibiting you from representing it as a community facility?" "We are appealing that order," Brenda said stiffly. "Until the appeal is heard, you have to comply with the order," Officer Martinez said. "That means you cannot be telling people this is a community park they can use." "So he gets to charge admission to a park that was built with HOA funds for the community?" Brenda demanded. "Madam, according to the court, this is his land," Officer Martinez said. "Yes, he can charge admission if he wants. You should not have built on his property." "This is not over," Brenda said to me, getting into her car. "You keep saying that," I called after her. After she left, Officer Martinez turned to me. "You are really going to charge people to use it?" "Probably not," I admitted, "but I wanted to make a point. They cannot just steal land and expect no consequences." He nodded. "Fair enough, but be careful. HOA disputes can get ugly." He had no idea how right he was. Over the next 2 weeks, things escalated in ways I had not anticipated. The HOA started a telephone and email campaign to other neighborhood residents, painting me as a greedy villain who was denying children a safe place to play. Never mind that they had built it illegally on my property. The narrative they pushed was that I was being selfish and litigious over a simple misunderstanding. I started getting nasty letters in my mailbox, anonymous notes calling me everything from a Scrooge to much more creative insults. Someone egged my house. Someone else let the air out of my tires. But I also started hearing from other homeowners who had their own horror stories about the HOA. A man named Tom 3 streets over had been fined $3,000 over a tree in his yard that the HOA claimed was non-conforming to community aesthetics, even though the tree had been there for 40 years. A woman named Sarah had been threatened with foreclosure over unpaid fines for having the wrong color curtains visible from the street. These people started reaching out to me quietly, offering support and sharing their own documentation of HOA overreach. I began to realize that Brenda and her board had been operating like petty tyrants for years, and most people were just too afraid or too worn down to fight back. The HOA's 30 days to remove the sledding park came and went. They did nothing. Patricia filed a motion for contempt of court, which resulted in another hearing. This time, Judge Carmichael was visibly angry. "Miss Whitmore," she said, addressing Brenda directly since she was the HOA president and named defendant, "do you understand what a court order means?" "Yes, Your Honor," Brenda said, considerably less confident than she had been at the previous hearing. "But the HOA has limited funds and removing the structure is expensive." "That is not my problem," Judge Carmichael said. "You built it without permission on someone else's property. The expense of removing it is a consequence of your own illegal actions. You have 7 days to begin removal, and it must be completed within 30 days of today, or I will hold you personally in contempt. You understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Brenda said quietly. The judge was not done. "Furthermore, given the HOA's complete disregard for the previous order, I am awarding additional legal fees to Mr. Sawyer. The HOA will pay all his attorney costs related to this contempt motion." After we left the courthouse, Patricia was practically glowing. "That was even better than the first hearing. They are going to have to pay thousands in legal fees now on top of removal costs." "Do you think they will actually do it this time?" I asked. "They had better," Patricia said. "Judge Carmichael does not make idle threats. If Brenda ignores this order, she could end up in jail for contempt." That evening, I received an unexpected visit from Richard Foster, who I learned was the HOA vice president. He was in his 50s, somewhat overweight, with the kind of face that looked like it was used to getting its way through bluster and volume. "We need to talk," he said when I answered the door. "About what?" I asked, not inviting him in. "About ending this situation reasonably," he said. "Can I come in?" Against my better judgment, I let him in. We sat in my living room and he spent several minutes looking around at my furniture and decorations before speaking. "Look," he finally said, "Brenda made some mistakes in how she handled this. We all recognize that now. But this has gotten out of hand. The HOA is facing significant expenses. Legal fees, removal costs, it is all adding up." "Okay," I said, waiting for whatever proposal he was about to make. "What if we made you a real offer for the land?" Richard asked. "A fair market value offer. $80,000, which is what you paid for it. You walk away whole, we keep the park, everyone wins." "No," I said immediately. "Why not?" he asked, looking genuinely puzzled. "You get all your money back, no loss to you." "Because it is my land," I said. "I bought it specifically because I wanted that extra space. I wanted the privacy, the buffer from the neighborhood. That was worth $80,000 to me 3 years ago, and it is still worth that to me now. More, actually, because property values have gone up." "We could go to 90,000, Richard offered. "No amount of money would make me sell that land to you," I said. "Even if I wanted to sell it, which I do not, I would never sell it to the HOA after what you people have put me through. You trespassed, you built on my property without permission, you ignored a court order, and you have spent weeks dragging my name through the mud in the neighborhood. Why would I reward that behavior?" Richard's friendly demeanor evaporated. "You are making a mistake," he said coldly. "The HOA has resources and connections. We can make your life here very difficult. You already have been," I pointed out. "And yet here I am, still winning in court. Are you threatening me, Richard?" "I am explaining reality," he said, standing up. "This neighborhood has standards. People who do not fit in tend to find it uncomfortable to stay." "Get out of my house," I said, standing as well. He left, but his parting look promised that this conversation was going to have consequences. He was right. Over the next week, I received 3 separate violation notices from the HOA. One claimed my lawn was a 1/4 inch too tall, which was absurd since it was December, and grass was not actively growing. Another claimed I had parked my car on the street overnight, which violated HOA rules, even though I had parked in my driveway as I always did. The third claimed my garbage bins were visible from the street outside of collection days, which they were not. Each violation came with a $50 fine and threatened additional fines if not corrected within 72 hours. I forwarded all of them to Patricia with a simple note. "Harassment," she responded within an hour. "Absolutely. Keep every single one. We are building a pattern of behavior case." The following week, A crew finally showed up to start removing the sledding park. I took the day off work to supervise, not trusting the HOA not to damage my property further out of spite. The crew foreman was a different contractor from the original builder. He introduced himself as Miguel and seemed professional and competent. "Just so you know," Miguel said quietly, "the HOA lady tried to tell us to accidentally damage your property while we are working. Knock down your fence, that sort of thing. We are not doing that. We do good work, and we do not get involved in people's personal disputes." "I appreciate that," I said, surprised by his honesty. "I will be recording everything anyway, but it is good to know you are here to do the job right." "She's a piece of work, that one," Miguel said, shaking his head. "Tried to short us on a previous job, too. We do not work for that HOA anymore after this." The removal took 3 days. Miguel's crew carefully dismantled the sledding hill, warming hut, fencing, and all other structures. They hauled everything away and even graded the land back to approximately its original contours. It was not perfect, but it was honest work, and I told Miguel I appreciated it. "You are going to need to reseed in the spring," he said on the last day. "Ground is too frozen now, but come April, get some good grass seed and topsoil on this." "Will do," I said. "Thanks for being professional about all this." "Good luck with your HOA," he said. "Seriously, those people are crazy." With the sledding park removed, I thought maybe the situation would finally die down. I should have known better. 2 weeks before Christmas, I came home to find a certified letter from the HOA's legal firm. They were suing me for damages to HOA reputation, interference with community activities, and demanding $90,000 in compensation. I actually laughed when I read it. Then I called Patricia. "They are doing what?" she asked, and I could hear the disbelief in her voice. "Suing me for damages because I would not let them use the sledding park they built illegally on my land," I said. "That is the most absurd thing I have ever heard," Patricia said. "This is a slap suit. They are trying to shut you up and punish you for standing up to them. Can they do that?" I asked. "They can file whatever they want," Patricia said, "but no judge is going to take this seriously. In fact, this might be the mistake we have been waiting for. Colorado has anti-slap statutes. If we can get this lawsuit dismissed as a slap, we can potentially recover additional damages from the HOA." "So this could actually backfire on them?" I asked. "Spectacularly," Patricia confirmed. "Let me file a response. This is going to be fun." What I did not know at the time was that, while the HOA was busy suing me for nonsense, several other homeowners had started organizing. Tom, the man with the tree problem, had created a private Facebook group for homeowners who had issues with the current HOA board. Within 2 weeks, it had over 60 members out of approximately 200 homes in the subdivision. People were sharing stories of outrageous fines, arbitrary rule enforcement, and financial mismanagement. Someone discovered that Brenda had awarded a landscaping contract to her brother-in-law's company at above market rates. Someone else found that the HOA had spent $12,000 on a community enhancement study conducted by a consulting firm that appeared to consist entirely of Brenda's college roommate. The more people dug, the more irregularities they found. It turned out that my situation was just the most blatant example of the HOA board's disregard for rules, both their own and actual laws. Tom contacted me in early January. "We are organizing a special election to recall the entire HOA board," he said. "We have the required number of homeowner signatures to force a vote. Would you be willing to run for a board position?" I thought about it. Part of me wanted nothing more to do with the HOA, but another part of me wanted to make sure people like Brenda could never do this to anyone else again. "Yes," I said, "I will run." The recall election was scheduled for February. The current board fought it every step of the way, claiming procedural irregularities and trying to invalidate signatures. But Tom had done his homework. Everything was by the book, and eventually they had no choice but to allow the vote. In the meantime, the HOA's lawsuit against me was proceeding through the courts. Patricia had filed a motion to dismiss under Colorado's anti-SLAPP statute, and we had a hearing scheduled for late January. The hearing was everything I had hoped it would be. Patricia presented a clear, devastating case that the lawsuit was retaliatory and designed to punish me for exercising my legal rights to defend my property. The HOA's attorney, Eric Hoffman, tried to argue that the HOA had suffered real damages to its reputation and finances because of my actions. Judge Carmichael, who was hearing this case as well since it was related to the original dispute, interrupted him mid-sentence. "Mr. Hoffman," she said, "are you seriously arguing that your client suffered damages because they were prevented from using property they do not own and were ordered by this court not to use?" "Your Honor, the community had expectations," Hoffman tried. "Expectations are not legal grounds for damages," Judge Carmichael said. "This lawsuit is frivolous. I am granting the motion to dismiss. Furthermore, under Colorado's anti-SLAPP statute, the defendant is entitled to attorney's fees and costs. I am also awarding an additional $10,000 in sanctions against the plaintiff HOA for bringing this baseless claim." I tried not to smile too broadly, but it was difficult. After the hearing, Patricia and I stood outside the courthouse in the cold January air. "That is 3 times now that you have beaten them in court," she said. "And they have paid your legal fees every time, plus now a $10,000 sanction. At this point, they have spent probably $50,000 on this whole thing." "Good," I said. "Maybe it will make them think twice before trying something like this again." "Speaking of which," Patricia said, "I heard about the recall election. If you win and end up on the HOA board, you need to make sure you do a complete financial audit." "I think there is more going on here than just bad judgment. Some of what I have heard sounds like it could be financial mismanagement or even embezzlement." "Really?" I asked. "Just a hunch," she said, "but it is worth looking into." The recall election campaign was brutal. Brenda and her board sent out multiple mailings claiming that the recall was being organized by a small group of troublemakers who wanted to destroy the neighborhood. They painted me specifically as a litigious villain who hated children and community spirit, but the opposition was organized too. Tom and several others went door to door, talking to homeowners, sharing documentation of the HOA's overreach and financial irregularities. We held meetings and shared information. People were angry, and that anger was directed at the current board. On Election Day in mid-February, the turnout was the highest the neighborhood had ever seen. When the votes were counted, the recall was approved by a margin of 68%. The entire old board was out. The new board consisted of 7 people, including me, Tom, Sarah, and 4 others who had been active in the reform movement. Our first official meeting was scheduled for a week after the election, giving us time to receive all official HOA documents and accounts from the outgoing board. Brenda was required to attend that first meeting to hand over all records. She arrived exactly on time, carrying 3 bankers' boxes of documents and looking like she had aged 5 years in the last few months. "These are all the HOA records," she said stiffly, setting the boxes on the table in the community center where we were meeting. "Bank statements, contracts, meeting minutes, architectural review files, everything." "Thank you," Tom said, who had been elected as the new HOA president. "We appreciate your cooperation." Brenda looked like she wanted to say something else, something cutting, but she just pressed her lips together and left. We spent the next 2 weeks going through those records. What we found was worse than any of us had imagined. The HOA's finances were a disaster. Brenda had approved multiple contracts to friends and relatives at inflated rates. There were credit card charges for personal expenses run through HOA accounts. Money from the reserve fund, which was supposed to be for emergencies and major repairs, had been spent on beautification projects that seemed to consist mainly of flowers and decorations around Brenda's own house. Most damning, we discovered that approximately $40,000 was simply missing, with no documentation about where it had gone. The largest chunk, $20,000, had been withdrawn as a community enhancement initiative with no further explanation. We consulted with an accountant who specialized in HOA finances. After reviewing everything, he confirmed our suspicions. "This is either gross financial negligence or outright embezzlement," he said. "You need to contact law enforcement." The board voted unanimously to report the matter to the Boulder Police Department's white-collar crime unit. Detective Sarah Morrison was assigned to the case. She was thorough and professional, and after reviewing the evidence we provided, she opened a formal investigation. "This is going to take some time," Detective Morrison told us. "Financial crimes require building a detailed case, but from what I can see here, there are clear irregularities that need to be explained." Over the next 3 months, Detective Morrison and her team conducted the investigation. They subpoenaed bank records, interviewed contractors, and eventually brought Brenda and several members of her old board in for questioning. In May, Brenda Whitmore was arrested and charged with embezzlement of HOA funds and fraud. The prosecutor's office alleged that she had systematically stolen approximately $37,000 over a 2-year period through fake contracts, personal expenses charged to the HOA, and direct withdrawals that she falsely documented. Richard Foster, the former vice president who had threatened me, was charged as an accessory because he had signed off on several of the fraudulent expenses. The arrest made the local news. The headline in the Boulder Daily Camera read, "HOA President Arrested for Embezzlement." The article detailed the charges and mentioned the Sledding Park dispute as an example of the board's disregard for proper procedures. My phone rang constantly for 2 days, with reporters wanting comments. I declined most interviews, but I did speak to one reporter who had been following the story from the beginning. "How does it feel to have been vindicated?" she asked. "It feels like justice," I said. "But honestly, I am just glad it is over. This was never about winning. It was about protecting my property rights and holding people accountable when they abuse their authority." The criminal case against Brenda took almost a year to go to trial. She was eventually convicted on most counts and sentenced to 2 years in prison, with credit for time served, plus 5 years of probation and full restitution to the HOA. Richard Foster accepted a plea deal that included probation, a fine, and community service in exchange for his testimony against Brenda. The new HOA board, meanwhile, worked to reform the organization from top to bottom. We rewrote the bylaws to include more transparency and homeowner protections. We eliminated most of the petty rules about lawn height and curtain colors. We conducted a proper assessment of actual community needs and started using HOA funds for things that benefited everyone, like maintaining common areas and organizing voluntary community events. I served on the board for 2 years and then stepped down, satisfied that the organization was on better footing. Tom took over as president and did an excellent job continuing the reforms we had started. As for my property, I had the land properly landscaped in the spring after the sledding park was removed. I planted native grasses and wildflowers, installed a small pond, and created a natural habitat that attracted birds and wildlife. It was exactly what I had wanted when I bought the place, and it was beautiful. Sometimes on summer evenings, I would sit on my back porch with a beer and look out at that land, remembering the absurdity of the sledding park dispute. It felt like something that had happened to someone else, in another life. One Saturday afternoon in late July, about 2 years after everything had been resolved, my doorbell rang. I answered it to find a woman in her 30s with 2 small children, a boy and a girl who looked to be about 6 and 8. "Hi," she said, looking a little uncertain. "I am Jennifer. I just moved into the neighborhood. Someone told me you were the person who stood up to the old HOA board." "That is one way to put it," I said, smiling. "What can I do for you?" "I wanted to thank you," she said. "I almost did not buy here because I heard horror stories about the HOA, but then I learned about what you and others did to fix it, and that changed my mind. The neighborhood seems wonderful now." "That is good to hear," I said. "Welcome to Pinewood Grove." The kids were peering around their mother, looking at my yard. "Your flowers are pretty," the little girl said. "Thank you," I said. "I like them too." After they left, I stood in my doorway for a moment, thinking about everything that had happened. The stress, the legal battles, the harassment, the vindication, and finally, the reform. It had been exhausting, but it had been worth it. Sometimes standing up for what is right is not easy. Sometimes it means fighting people who have more resources, more connections, and no shame about using both against you. But property rights matter. Personal boundaries matter. Accountability matters. And sometimes, if you stand firm long enough, the right thing actually happens. I closed the door and went back to my peaceful Saturday afternoon, looking out at the land that was mine, that had always been mine, and feeling grateful that I had fought to keep it that way. The sun set over the mountains that evening in shades of orange and purple, and for the first time in years, I felt completely at peace with my decision to move to Colorado, to buy this house with the extra land, and to fight when that was threatened. My property, my rules, my rights. That was how it should be, and that was how it ended up being. And that's Sledding Park. It never existed as far as I am concerned. It was just a bad dream that some people had at my expense, and when they woke up, reality had reasserted itself exactly as it should have from the beginning.